Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Alberta News and Views. A while back on my podcast, I talked about how bad the drugs and the organized crime is in Alberta. And so many people couldn't believe it. It was literally unbelievable because the media wasn't covering it enough. Now, I made this podcast around the time that they were removing the tent towns, the tent cities in Edmonton and Calgary. The evidence that the police had was just completely overlooked. It was a new level of organized crime and drugs and exploitation in Alberta. It's unfounded. So today, there is a really good interview with Jordan Peterson and Minister of Seniors, Community and Social Services, Jason Nixon, talking about Alberta and this exact subject. I'm just going to show you the chunk of it where they're talking about the drugs, the gangs, and yes, the cartels. The cartels are in Alberta. And I just think it is so important, that all Canadians realize what this country is turning into. And I believe it is because of the collapse of the family, of the church, of all of these social structures that really kept us together as a community to make sure that this type of evil doesn't put its tentacles out and creep in to our towns and cities. Listen to this.
Is invite the psychopathic gangs to come in and take control. Now, you said that's what's happened, that not only are these tent cities, so-called, places of massive drugs distribution, they're sources of ongoing revenue for not only for gangs, but for organized gangs. And so for like hardcore, multiple offense, dead set against the public order criminals to prey on people who are vulnerable, the addicted population, let's say, and to prey on them in a multitude of ways. You skipped over some very interesting details, like they're being charged to stay in the tents. Well, by who? It's not like anybody owns those tents or the land. Okay, they're being charged to get access to water. And then there's what, prostitution gangs? And if not prostitution gangs, what, open rape? Like, exactly what did you guys see when you started delving into this subculture produced by the toxically compassionate?
Hold on, it's incredible.
So you're 100% right. And when I say gangs, I'm talking about very organized gangs, definitely organized crime. The police brought the government very clear evidence, which they have presented to the media, including photographic evidence of what is taking place inside these tent cities that show that the gangs have control within them and are certainly abusing vulnerable people as a result of that. It's obviously a place where they're selling drugs. It's obviously a place where people are getting access to things that they should not. But we also have received clear evidence that people are being charged even to get to water fountains, is a common thing that the police have brought to us. This for me personally was one of the things that I was just shocked that the media in my province did not cover as much as they should. Some of the early tent cities that they went into, the police came out with evidence of minor children being sexually exploited within these tent cities. That alone, for me, was enough that we needed to tear them all down. Full stop, completely unacceptable. So, and then the other thing that I should point out that the chief of the Edmonton Police Service really has done a good job of articulating for the media is how much stolen property in and of itself is being stored within these tent cities. I mean, they went to this one area where there was a mound of bicycles that were clearly stolen, that were bigger than me. And Jordan, I'm a real big guy. I'm about 6'8". There's a big pile of stolen property. And so there's been clear evidence time and time again that documents what is taking place with the gangs inside these areas. And you're right. They are exploiting the most vulnerable amongst us. And so it's not safe. And I think the key point to this is it's not safe for the people in the tent cities, and it's not safe for Edmontonians. And I think this is the same circumstance you would see in any other major city in North America where these tent cities are taking place.
And what's incredible is the NDP party was fighting to keep those tent cities up and running, saying they didn't have anywhere else to go. They do have other places to go. And he talks about that in this interview, how they bounce from location to location, exploiting and taking advantage of the services that us taxpayers provide. The drug dealers have never had it so good. They really haven't. They get government-funded drugs, sell it for harder drugs. It's like a huge discount.
Well, it's not safe for a variety of reasons. I mean, here's a compelling reason. So imagine you set up a set of essentially lawless domains, and in consequence, you produce a specialized breed of psychopathic criminal who is then highly organized. It's like if you think that highly organized criminal gang is going to limit its criminal activity to the tent city once it's established, you're an absolute bloody fool. And so we know, for example, as criminologists that, and I did a lot of work as a researcher in the area of antisocial personality and criminology, 1% of the criminals are responsible for 65% of the crimes.
Wow.
You let those long-term life course psychopathic repeat offenders get away with what they're doing, you're going to reap the whirlwind. Right? It's a very, very bad idea. And so now why do you think, okay, so let's ask two questions. Who are these gangs and where do they come from? Right? And who's running in the drugs? How much of that's coming from China? Who's controlling the distribution? Do you guys have a sense of that? And well, let's start with that.
You know, in Alberta, the way I've been briefed with our law enforcement support is that we're seeing a variety of gangs, particularly indigenous gangs when you're in the Edmonton area that are operating on the street. But we also have clear evidence of actually cartels, including Mexican cartels, and some of this coming from the Asian market, to your point, all operating here within the province of Alberta. So these are pretty seriously organized gangs. A lot of that is to bring in the drugs, obviously, to our street, and then they're using our street gangs, which are often indigenous on the streets, to be able to move that product through places like tent cities.
When you think about how much influence just one psychopathic drug dealer has, and you think about the bail system, when there's no repercussions of that, you can really see how it's spreading. And this is what is happening in Canada right now and in Alberta. That's why the drug problem is accelerating so fast, and why these safe supplies and all of that nonsense is just throwing gasoline on the fire.
Okay, so you made reference to the Mexican cartels. Let's start with the Mexican cartels and the Asian supply. Do you have any more details on either of those fronts? It's a lovely thing to imagine now that the Mexican cartels are operating not only in the southern U.S., but in Alberta itself. That's a real accomplishment on our part, I must say. And so Mexican cartels and Asian supply. I presume the Asian supply is mostly associated with fentanyl?
Yes, that is correct. And, you know, the best person in our government to talk to about this is obviously our public safety minister, who's managing this closely and be the one giving us this information.
Yeah,
but we certainly have clear evidence of cartels bringing drugs, particularly across our southern border. And frankly, we're now starting to see inside our province where we're becoming an exporter of things like fentanyl. So some of the products are being brought up here to be made on our side of the line and then now brought back even down south, which is quite a new thing for the province of Alberta. But certainly, you know, it explains some of the circumstances that we're seeing in our province. And I would say, Jordan, that Edmonton for us, which our capital city, is probably one of our smaller drug problems. So, you know, one of the bigger areas we're seeing some of our largest drug problems on the street is actually in Lethbridge, which interestingly enough is the closest city to the American border, a large city in our province to the American border. And really, I think is a proof point that some of that drugs is starting there because of what's taking place on the border, which is why we're seeing some of the most potent and deadly drugs inside the Lethbridge area as it works its way into the street culture.
Right. So maybe I should also at some point talk to the public safety minister. So, okay. And then you mentioned indigenous gangs. Okay. So now when I lived in Alberta in the 1980s, now that's getting to be quite a long time ago, 40 years ago, there weren't organized indigenous street gangs, or if there were very few of them. I mean, Edmonton was a stunningly safe place with the exception of a few blocks downtown, which by, say, American standards were still relative. American downtown dangerous standards was still pretty civilized. Yeah. There was just not a problem. So what's shifted in Alberta, and what is the makeup and origin of these indigenous gangs?
Free drugs in the bail system.
I think what's shifted is the money in the drug markets, for sure. would provide more ability for gangs to become more and more organized. And, the police have been out in our province very clearly establishing who these gangs are. And they're the ones who are giving me as a cabinet minister that information of what is taking place there. I mean, obviously, my job is to provide that social services support to individuals within these tent cities, but we're working closely with the police, who are the ones coming and briefing us about the dangers of gangs. And there is no doubt in the city of Edmonton, but also across our province, that we continue to see that organized gang element increasing. My personal view is, and I think the police would agree with me, that a lot of that is being driven obviously by drugs. And, as I think I used to work in a homeless shelter. I grew up in a homeless shelter. My father is the founder of one of the largest homeless shelters and organizations that work with the poor in Western Canada here in Calgary, called the Mustard Seed. And we did not see anything like this type of drug activity even 15 years ago. We would never have imagined a spot where we would see individuals working within shelters seeing multiple overdoses a day, and sometimes multiple fatalities in a week inside their facilities. And that just shows you what's changed as far as the drug market, which is logical, what is driving this organized crime element, because of the money that would be involved in that.
It's incredible. I'll leave it at that. It's really good. Just, you can look up Jordan Peterson, Alberta versus drugs, gangs, and cartels. My biggest fear is there's just a slowdown in the economy. There's so many people here, the crime and the housing, especially the housing crisis and the cost of living crisis. People need food. They need to do something, right? My biggest fear is it's going to get worse, and it's going to get a lot worse. Elections have consequences. Do they ever? We need way more police, a stronger community, and we really need to bond together to squeeze it out, and a justice system that works. It is just incredible what has happened to Alberta and the rest of Canada, and easily preventable. Follow me on Substack and Spotify. All of you out there, like, share, and take care.